100 Years of Solitude begins as a flashback, with Colonel Aureliano Buendiá recollecting the years immediately following the founding of Macondo, when a band of gypsies frequently bring technological marvels to the dreamy, isolated village. José Arcadio Buendiá, the insatiably curious founder of the town, is obsessed with these magical implements. Using supplies given to him by Melquiades, the leader of the gypsies, he immerses himself in scientific study, to the frustration of his more practical wife, Ursula Iguaran. Eventually, with Melquiades' prodding, José Arcadio Buendiá begins to explore alchemy, the pseudo-science of making gold out of other metals. He is driven by a desire for progress and by an intense search for knowledge that forces him into solitude. Increasingly, he withdraws from human contact, becoming unkempt, antisocial, and interested only in his pursuit of knowledge. But José Arcadio Buendiá is not always a solitary scientist. On the contrary, he is the leader who oversaw the building of the village of Macondo, an idyllic place dedicated to hard work and order, filled with young people, and as yet unvisited by death. In his quest for knowledge and progress, José Arcadio Buendiá's obsession shifts to a desire to establish contact with civilization. He leads an expedition to the north, since he knows there is only swamp to the west and south, and mountains to the east, but he then decides that Macondo is surrounded by water and inaccessible to the rest of the world. When he plans to move Macondo to another, more accessible place, however, he is stopped by his wife, who refuses to leave. Thwarted, he turns his attention finally to his children, José Arcadio, who has inherited his father's great strength, and Aureliano, later known as Colonel Aureliano Buendiá, who seems even as a child enigmatic and withdrawn. When the gypsies return, they bring word that Melquiades is dead. Despite his sadness at the news, José Arcadio Buendiá does not lose interest in new technology and marvels. When the gypsies show him ice, the patriarch of Macondo proclaims it the greatest invention in the world. In telling the story of Macondo's founding, the book now moves backward in time. The cousins José Arcadio Buendiá and Ursula Iguaran are born in a small village, the great-grandchildren of those surviving Sir Francis Drake's attack on Riohacha. Ursula is afraid to consummate their marriage, as children of incest were said to have terrible genetic defects. There was precedent for this. Two of their relatives gave birth to a child with a pig's tail. But as time passes after their marriage, and Ursula continues to refuse to have sex out of fear of the genetic deformity of their child, the people of the village begin to mock José Arcadio Buendiá. When a rival, Prudencio Aguilar, implies that Buendiá is impotent, Buendiá kills him. Haunted by guilt and the spectre of Aguilar, José Arcadio Buendiá decides to leave his home. After many months of wandering, they establish the village of Macondo. On seeing the ice of the gypsies, José Arcadio Buendiá remembers his dream of Macondo as a city built with mirror walls, which he interprets to mean ice. He immerses himself again in his scientific study, this time accompanied by his son, Aureliano. Meanwhile, the older son, José Arcadio, still a teenager, is seduced by a local woman, Pilar Ternera, who is attracted to him because of the huge size of his penis. Eventually, he impregnates her. Before their child can be born, however, he meets a young gypsy girl and falls madly in love with her. When the gypsies leave town, José Arcadio joins them. Grief-stricken at the loss of her eldest son, Ursula tries to follow the gypsies, leaving behind her newborn girl, Amaranta. 5 months later, Ursula returns, having discovered the simple 2-day journey through the swamp that connects Macondo with civilization. As a result of Ursula Iguaran's discovery of a route connecting Macondo with civilization, the village begins to change. The village grows along with the Buendiá family, with José Arcadio Buendiá playing a key role in the expansion of both. Pilar Ternera gives birth to the son of the missing José Arcadio. The boy is named Arcadio. Joining the family too is an orphan girl, Rebecca, who arrives mysteriously one day and whose origin is unclear. Nevertheless, the Buendias raise her as one of their own children, first conquering her self-destructive habits of eating dirt and whitewash. Rebecca, it soon becomes evident, is afflicted with an insomnia that also causes memory loss. Eventually, the entire town becomes infected with insomnia and the associated amnesia. To facilitate memory, the inhabitants of the town begin to label everything. First, they put up a giant sign to remind themselves that God exists, and then dread the day when the labels will have no meaning because the residents will have forgotten how to read. Pilar Ternera, who tells fortunes on a deck of cards, now uses the cards to tell the past as well. The insomnia is only cured when, unexpectedly, Melquiades the gypsy returns to town bearing an antidote. Melquiades, who, it seems, has returned from the dead, brings with him a technology never before seen in Macondo, the daguerreotype. José Arcadio Buendiá sets to work trying to make a daguerreotype of God to prove his existence. Aureliano, José Arcadio Buendia's second son, has become a master silversmith. He spends his days shut up in the laboratory that he shares with Melquiades, each of them obsessively absorbed with their strange pursuits. Now mature, Aureliano remains solitary and aloof, apparently uninterested in women. As the family and village expand, Ursula vastly expands the Buendiá house. The town magistrate, a representative of the central government, newly arrived in the formerly autonomous Macondo, attempts to dictate the color their house will be painted. José Arcadio Buendiá drives the magistrate, Don Apolinar Moscot, out of town, and when Moscot returns, accompanied by his family and several soldiers, Buendiá forces him to forfeit much of his authority over the village. Despite his father's enmity toward the magistrate, however, Aureliano falls in love with the magistrate's youngest daughter, Remedios Moscote. Lonely and despairing, Aureliano sleeps with Pilar Ternera, the same woman whom his older brother had impregnated, and she helps Aureliano in his campaign to marry Remedios. While Aureliano is pining over the impossibly young Remedios, the Buendiá family's two girls, Amaranta and the adoptee Rebecca, both fall in love with a stranger, Pietro Crespi, who has come to Macondo to install a pianola in the Buendiá house. They make themselves sick with love. Rebecca goes back to eating earth and whitewash, and Crespi decides he wants to marry her. The marriages of Rebecca to Crespi and Aureliano to Remedios are arranged, even though Amaranta, wildly jealous of Rebecca, vows to stop her marriage. When the gypsy Melquiades slowly passes away, he is the first person to die in Macondo. After his mourning period is over, a semblance of happiness descends on the house. Pietro Crespi and Rebecca are in love, courting, and Aureliano is becoming closer to his future bride, Remedios. Even the news that Pilar Ternera is pregnant with his child does not bother Aureliano, but the happiness does not last. Amaranta's threat to destroy Rebecca's wedding deeply troubles Rebecca. José Arcadio Buendiá, exhausted by his endless research into the unknown, slips into insanity. He has visions of the man he killed early in his life and is racked with sorrow over the solitude of death. He becomes convinced that the same day is repeating itself over and over again. He begins to rage, tearing up the house, and it takes 20 men to drag him out and tie him to a tree in the backyard, where he remains until the end of his life, many years later. Soon after Remedios reaches puberty, she and Aureliano are married. Rebecca's wedding, which is to take place at the same time, is postponed because Pietro Crespi is called away by an urgent letter that says his mother is gravely ill. The letter proves false, and Amaranta is suspected of forging it to delay the marriage. Remedios provides a breath of fresh air in the Buendiá household, endearing herself to everybody, and even deciding to raise Aureliano's bastard son, born to Pilar Ternera as her own child. He is named Aureliano José. Soon after the marriage, however, Remedios dies of a sudden internal ailment, possibly a miscarriage, and the house plunges into mourning. This period of grief proves yet another in the interminable set of obstacles for Rebecca and Pietro Crespi, who cannot be married while the Buendiá household is in mourning. Another setback is the tremendously long time it takes to build the first church in Macondo, which has been visited for the first time by organized religion. The priest who is building the church makes the startling discovery that José Arcadio Buendia's apparent madness is not as severe as everyone thinks. The gibberish he spouts is not nonsense, but pure Latin in which he can converse. The period of mourning and delay are simultaneously brought to an end by the return of José Arcadio, the oldest son of José Arcadio Buendiá. He is a beast of a man, enormously strong, tattooed all over his body, impulsive and crude. Despite her engagement to Pietro Crespi, Rebecca is enthralled by José Arcadio's masculinity, and they begin a torrid affair, governed by lust. The affair ends in marriage, and they are exiled from the house by the outraged Ursula. There develops, however, a growing tenderness between Crespi and Amaranta, whom he had previously spurned in favor of Rebecca. Aureliano, who had resigned himself to solitude after the death of Remedios, soon finds a larger concern. The impending war between the conservative government, represented in Macondo by the magistrate who is Aureliano's father-in-law, Don Apolinar Moscote, and the insurgent liberals. Upset by the dishonesty and corruption of the conservatives, Aureliano allies himself with the liberals. When war breaks out, and the town is brutally occupied by the conservative army, Aureliano leads young men of the town in a rebellion, conquering the town for the liberals. He leaves at the head of a small liberal army, and is henceforth known in the novel as Colonel Aureliano Buendiá. Eventually, he becomes the leader of the liberal armies. Colonel Aureliano Buendiá leaves Macondo with his hastily assembled troops and joins the national civil war effort, fathering 17 children around the country as he goes. He leaves Arcadio, the illegitimate son of José Arcadio and Pilar Ternera, in charge of the town in his absence, and Arcadio becomes a dictator, obsessed with order and given to cruelty. When he tries to sleep with Pilar Ternera, his own mother, she sends him a young virgin named Santa Sofía de la Piedad instead. He marries her, and she gives birth to 3 children, Remedios the Beauty, Aureliano II, and José Arcadio II. When the liberals lose the war and the conservatives retake the town, Arcadio is executed by a firing squad. While the war rages and Arcadio's dictatorship continues, Pietro Crespi proposes marriage to Amaranta, who cruelly rejects him despite her love for him, and he commits suicide. Penitent, she burns her hand horribly, covering it with the black bandage that she will wear until her death.